Imagine sitting in a doctor's office, glowing with the joy of an unexpected midlife pregnancy, only to overhear the one person you trust most, your millionaire husband, whispering secrets that shatter your world. What if his affair with a scheming mistress wasn't just betrayal, but a calculated plot to steal your unborn baby, manipulate your life, and leave you broken and penniless in this heartbreaking family drama? Follow Elena's desperate fight through layers of deception, shocking twists, and a DNA test that will leave everyone speechless. From midlife insecurities and financial ruin to fierce female empowerment and resilience inspired by stories like Eat, Pray, Love and The Good Wife. This tale will grip you from the first whisper to the final revelation. Will justice prevail, or will the ultimate betrayal win? Stick around to find out. You won't believe the ending. If this story hooks you like it did me, hit that like button if you're rooting for Elena. Drop a comment with your biggest plot twist prediction. Share this with a friend who survived betrayal. And subscribe for more edge-of-your-seat dramas that expose the dark side of love and family. Turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Your support keeps these stories coming. Mistress stole pregnant wife's baby. Millionaire's DNA test left him speechless. Elena Martinez pressed her hand against her growing belly as she sat in the pristine waiting room of Dr. Harrison's obstetrics practice. At 45, this pregnancy had come as a beautiful surprise after years of believing her childbearing days were behind her. The soft hum of classical music and the gentle lighting should have been calming, but something felt different today. Her husband Richard had been acting strangely lately, taking calls in private and working late more often than usual. "Mrs. Martinez, the doctor will see you now," the nurse called with a warm smile. Elena stood slowly, her hand instinctively moving to support her lower back. The midlife pregnancy had been more challenging than she remembered from her early 20s, but the joy of carrying their child made every discomfort worthwhile. She had sacrificed her promising marketing career 15 years ago to support Richard's business ventures, and now, finally, they were being blessed with the family they had always dreamed of expanding. As she walked down the hallway, Elena caught a glimpse of a familiar figure through the glass doors of the office next door. Her heart stopped. Richard was there, in the fertility clinic section of the medical building, but he was supposed to be in important meetings across town. What was her millionaire husband doing here when he should be closing a major business deal? Elena pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear. Through the slightly open door, she could make out Richard's voice, hushed but urgent. "Amanda, darling, you need to understand that this changes everything. Elena doesn't suspect anything yet, but once the baby comes, we'll have what we've been planning for. Just be patient a little longer." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Amanda, the name that had been appearing on Richard's phone with increasing frequency. The woman he claimed was just a business associate helping with overseas investments. Elena's hands trembled as she realized the devastating truth about her husband's affair with his mistress. "But Richard," came a sultry voice that Elena now recognized from the few times Amanda had called while Elena was nearby. "What if she finds out about our plans? What if the pregnant wife betrayed discovers what we're really doing? This whole scheme depends on timing." Elena's breath caught in her throat. Plan, scheme. What were they talking about? Her mind raced as she tried to process the heartbreaking family drama unfolding before her. This wasn't just about an affair. This was something bigger, something that involved her and her unborn child. "Trust me, Amanda, I've been setting the groundwork for months." Elena's so focused on the pregnancy and her midlife worries about body image that she hasn't noticed the financial changes I've been making. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. We'll have everything we need to start our new life together. Elena pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Financial changes. What had Richard been doing with their money? The millionaire lifestyle they had built together was supposed to be secure. She thought about their beautiful home, the investments, the trust funds Richard had mentioned setting up for their future family. "Mrs. Martinez," the nurse had appeared beside her, looking concerned. Are you feeling all right? You look quite pale. Elena forced herself to straighten up, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. I'm fine. Just felt a little dizzy for a moment. Well, let's get you into the examination room and have Dr. Harrison take a look at you. Pregnancy at 45 can sometimes bring unexpected challenges. As Elena followed the nurse, her mind was spinning with the implications of what she had just heard. The husband affair with Mistress wasn't just about infidelity. This was a calculated betrayal that somehow involved her pregnancy, their finances, and Amanda's own presence at a fertility clinic. What kind of elaborate deception had Richard been orchestrating? In the examination room, Elena tried to focus on Dr. Harrison's cheerful chatter about the baby's development, but Richard's words kept echoing in her mind. The ultrasound screen flickered to life, showing the tiny form of their child, and Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Oh, happy tears, Dr. Harrison said with a smile. It's always emotional seeing your little one developing so beautifully. But Elena's tears weren't from joy. They were from the crushing realization that her entire life had been built on lies. As she watched her baby moving on the screen, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard and Amanda had plans for this child that she knew nothing about. The very thought made her feel sick. Doctor, Elena said shakily, I need to ask you something confidential. Has my husband been here before without me? Dr. Harrison frowned slightly. Mrs. Martinez, I can't discuss other patients or visits without proper authorization. Is there something specific you're concerned about? Elena's mind was racing. If Richard had been at the fertility clinic with Amanda, what were they planning? Were they trying to have a child together? Was that part of their scheme? The questions multiplied in her head, each one more terrifying than the last. After the appointment, Elena sat in her luxury SUV in the parking lot, staring at the ultrasound photos in her hands. The baby who should have been bringing her pure joy was now at the center of a mystery that threatened to destroy everything she thought she knew about her life. She thought about the woman she had been just an hour ago, a content homemaker, excited about becoming a mother again at 45, secure in her marriage and her future. Now she felt like she was drowning in uncertainty. The midlife betrayal story that was unfolding around her felt surreal, like something that happened to other women, not to her. Elena picked up her phone with trembling fingers. She needed answers, but she also needed to be smart about how she got them. Richard was a successful businessman who had built his fortune through careful planning and strategic thinking. If he was involved in some kind of scheme, confronting him directly might not be the wisest approach. Instead, she called her best friend Lisa, the one person who had always been honest with her, even when the truth was hard to hear. Lisa, I need to see you right away. Something terrible has happened. Elena, you sound awful. Is the baby okay? Are you okay? The baby's fine, but everything else. Elena's voice broke. Richard is having an affair, but it's worse than that. I think he and his mistress are planning something involving the baby. I don't know what to do. Oh, honey, come over right now. We'll figure this out together. As Elena drove to Lisa's house, her mind kept returning to Amanda's words about timing and schemes. What could they possibly be planning that involved her pregnancy? The more she thought about it, the more frightened she became. Richard had access to their finances, their legal documents, everything. If he wanted to betray her, he had all the tools he needed to do it thoroughly. Lisa's embrace when she arrived was exactly what Elena needed. Her friend had always been her anchor during difficult times, the voice of reason when Elena's emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Tell me everything, Lisa said, settling Elena on the couch with a cup of herbal tea. Elena recounted the entire devastating scene at the medical building, watching Lisa's face grow increasingly concerned as the story unfolded. Elena, this sounds like more than just an affair. The fact that they were talking about schemes and timing involving your pregnancy, that's deeply troubling. I keep thinking about what Amanda meant when she mentioned plans. What could they possibly want with my baby? Lisa was quiet for a moment, and Elena could see her friend's mind working through the possibilities. Have you noticed anything strange about your finances lately? Any papers Richard has asked you to sign? Changes in your insurance or legal documents? Elena thought back over the past few months. Actually, yes. Richard had me sign some updates to our insurance policies. He said it was routine, preparing for the baby, and there were some trust documents, investment changes. I trusted him completely, so I signed whatever he put in front of me. Elena, you need to get copies of those documents immediately. If Richard is planning something involving the baby and your finances, those papers might hold the key to understanding what they're doing. The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. Elena had been a successful marketing professional before her marriage, but 15 years of depending on Richard's business acumen had left her somewhat naive about their financial situation. She had trusted him completely, never questioning his decisions or demanding to see detailed documentation. I feel so stupid. Lisa, how could I have been so blind? The signs were probably there all along. Don't blame yourself. Trusting your husband isn't stupid. It's what marriage is supposed to be about. But now you need to protect yourself and your baby. That evening, Elena returned home to find Richard waiting for her with flowers and an expensive bottle of sparkling cider, the non-alcoholic kind he always bought for her pregnancy cravings. His smile was as charming as ever, but now she could see the calculation behind it. How was your appointment? Darling, is our little miracle doing well? Elena forced herself to smile back. Even though her heart was breaking, everything looks perfect. Dr. Harrison said the baby is developing beautifully. Wonderful news. I have some exciting business developments to share with you over dinner. The overseas investments are really starting to pay off. As Richard chatted about his business successes, Elena studied his face, looking for signs of deception. How long had he been lying to her? How many of their intimate conversations had been calculated, performances designed to keep her in the dark about his real intentions? That night, as Richard slept beside her, Elena lay awake staring at the ceiling. The baby moved restlessly in her womb, and she placed her hands protectively over her belly. Whatever Richard and Amanda were planning, she would not let them hurt her child. But first, she needed to understand exactly what they were scheming. The next morning, after Richard left for what he claimed was an important meeting, Elena began her investigation. She started with their home office, carefully going through the financial documents that Richard usually kept locked away. What she found made her blood run cold. The trust funds Richard had established weren't for their child's benefit. They were structured in a way that would give Richard complete control over the assets if Elena were to become incapacitated or if there were questions about the child's parentage. The insurance policies had been changed to remove Elena as the primary beneficiary, with the benefits now going to a trust that Richard controlled entirely. But most disturbing of all was a folder labeled Legal Contingencies that contained documents outlining custody arrangements and financial settlements in case of divorce or separation. Richard had been planning for the end of their marriage for months, all while convincing Elena that they were preparing for their new family together. Elena's hands shook as she photographed each document with her phone. The evidence was overwhelming. Her husband hadn't just been having an affair. He had been systematically dismantling their life together while she had been joyfully preparing for their baby's arrival. As she was replacing the documents in Richard's desk, Elena heard the front door open. Her heart raced as she quickly closed the drawers and tried to compose herself. "Elena, I forgot some important papers," Richard's voice called from the hallway. She rushed out of the office just as Richard was heading toward it. "Oh, I was just dusting in there, making sure everything's perfect for when the baby comes." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "Dusting? We have a cleaning service for that." "I know, but I wanted to do something special. Nesting instincts, I suppose." Richard studied her face for a moment, and Elena prayed that her expression didn't betray the storm of emotions raging inside her. Finally, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, make sure you don't overexert yourself. We need to keep you and the baby healthy." After Richard left again, Elena collapsed into a chair, her heart pounding. The way he had looked at her just now, it was as if he was evaluating her, calculating something. The loving husband she thought she knew was turning out to be a stranger capable of elaborate deception. Elena spent the rest of the day researching divorce attorneys and private investigators. If Richard was planning to betray her, she needed to be prepared to fight back. But as she sat in her beautiful home, surrounded by the luxury that Richard's success had provided, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. The hardest part was the realization that her midlife crisis wasn't just about adjusting to pregnancy at 45. It was about discovering that everything she had built her identity around was crumbling. She wasn't just Elena Martinez, devoted wife and soon-to-be mother. She was Elena Martinez, the pregnant wife betrayed by the man she had trusted with her life. As evening approached, Elena made a decision. She would confront Richard, but not directly. She would be strategic, just as he had been. She would gather more evidence, build her case, and protect her child. The heartbreaking family drama that was unfolding around her might be Richard's creation, but she would determine how it ended. That night at dinner, as Richard chatted about his business success and their bright future together, Elena smiled and nodded, all while planning her next moves. The naive woman who had walked into that doctor's office was gone forever. In her place was someone who was learning to be as calculating as the man who had betrayed her trust. But as she lay in bed that night, feeling her baby kick against her ribs, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Richard's conversation with Amanda had mentioned timing and schemes that went beyond simple adultery. Whatever they were planning, it was bigger than just ending their marriage. The thought that kept her awake was Amanda's presence at the fertility clinic. What was Richard's mistress doing there? And why had they both seemed so confident that their plans would succeed once the baby was born? Elena pressed her hands against her belly, making a silent promise to her unborn child. No matter what Richard and Amanda were scheming, she would protect her baby. The pregnant wife betrayed was about to become the pregnant wife who fought back. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Elena's kitchen as she sat across from Margaret Walsh, the divorce attorney Lisa had recommended. At 62, Margaret had the kind of sharp intelligence and no-nonsense demeanor that came from 30 years of handling high-stakes divorce cases involving wealthy families. Mrs. Martinez, based on what you've told me and the documents you've photographed, your husband has been planning this betrayal for quite some time, Margaret said, reviewing the papers on her tablet. The trust structures and insurance changes are particularly concerning. Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, seeking comfort from its warmth. What exactly is he trying to accomplish? I still don't understand why he would go to such elaborate lengths. In cases like this, it's usually about maintaining control of assets while appearing to provide for the family. By structuring everything through trust that he controls, Richard can effectively cut you out of your marital finances while making it look like he's being generous. The reality of her situation was becoming clearer, but it also raised new questions. Margaret, there's something else. I overheard Richard talking to his mistress at a fertility clinic. They mentioned timing and schemes involving my pregnancy. What could that possibly mean? Margaret's expression grew more serious. That's deeply troubling. In some cases, unfaithful spouses will try to manipulate pregnancies for financial or legal advantage. Has Richard been particularly involved in your prenatal care? Has he insisted on specific doctors or medical facilities? Elena thought back over the past few months. Actually, yes. He chose Dr. Harrison and insisted we use the medical center downtown instead of the hospital closer to our home. He said it was because they had better facilities. But now, Mrs. Martinez, I need you to be very careful about your medical care going forward. Make sure you're comfortable with your healthcare providers. And consider getting a second opinion from a doctor Richard hasn't chosen. As Elena left Margaret's office, her mind was spinning with new fears. The husband affair with Mistress was bad enough, but the possibility that Richard was manipulating her pregnancy for some unknown purpose made her feel physically sick. She had always trusted Richard's judgment about everything, including her medical care. Now she had to question every decision they had made together. That afternoon, Elena decided to visit her friend Sarah, a nurse practitioner who worked at the city's main hospital. Sarah had always been the most practical member of their friend group, the one who could cut through emotion to focus on facts. "Elena, honey, you look exhausted," Sarah said, welcoming her into her office during her lunch break. "Lisa told me you're going through a rough patch with Richard." "Sarah, I need to ask you something confidential. Is there any way that someone could manipulate a pregnancy for financial or legal purposes? Could there be medical procedures or documents that I should be worried about?" Sarah's expression grew concerned. "Elena, what exactly are you worried about? Has Richard done something to make you question your medical care?" Elena explained about overhearing Richard's conversation with Amanda at the fertility clinic, and Sarah's face grew increasingly grave as the story unfolded. "Elena, there are several things you should be concerned about. First, make sure you have copies of all your medical records. Second, consider switching to a different medical practice, one that Richard has no connection to. And third, be very careful about signing any documents related to the baby or your medical care." But what could they possibly be planning? What would Richard gain by manipulating my pregnancy? In high-asset divorces, control over children and their custody can determine financial outcomes. If Richard is planning to divorce you after the baby is born, he might be trying to establish legal or financial advantages that would affect custody arrangements or support payments. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The thought that Richard might be using her pregnancy as part of a calculated business strategy was almost too horrible to contemplate, but given everything she had discovered about the financial deception, it wasn't impossible. That evening, Elena made an excuse about needing to shop for baby items and instead drove to a different part of the city to meet with Dr. Patricia Chen, an obstetrician Sarah had recommended. Dr. Chen's practice was smaller and more personal than the high-end medical center Richard had chosen, but Elena immediately felt more comfortable there. "Mrs. Martinez, I'd be happy to take over your prenatal care," Dr. Chen said after reviewing the medical records Elena had obtained from Dr. Harrison's office. "Everything looks normal with your pregnancy, but I do notice some unusual notations in your file." "What kind of notations?" She, in my TT. "There are several references to genetic testing and paternity verification procedures that seem unnecessary given your medical history. Has anyone discussed these tests with you?" Elena's heart sank. "No, Dr. Harrison never mentioned any of that. What would those tests be for?" "Well, genetic testing is sometimes recommended for mothers over 40, but the paternity verification procedures are unusual unless there's a specific medical need or legal requirement." Elena left Dr. Chen's office with more questions than answers, but also with a growing determination to protect herself and her baby. The evidence was mounting that Richard's betrayal went far beyond simple adultery. He was planning something that involved manipulating her pregnancy and potentially their child's future. That night, as Richard worked late in his office, Elena carefully searched through his personal belongings. In his briefcase, she found a business card for a private genetics lab and a folder labeled "Contingency Planning" that contained documents she didn't recognize. Among the papers was a contract with a private adoption agency and what appeared to be medical power of attorney documents that would give Richard control over medical decisions if Elena were to become incapacitated during childbirth. The implications were terrifying. Elena photographed everything before carefully replacing the documents exactly as she had found them. As she made her way back to their bedroom, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized. No longer the trusting wife who had discovered the affair just days ago, but someone who was learning to be suspicious, careful, and strategic. The next morning, Elena received a text message from an unknown number. "I know what your husband is planning. We need to meet. This is about your baby's safety." Elena stared at the message, her hands trembling. Who could be texting her? How did they know about Richard's plans? And most importantly, what did they mean about her baby's safety? She showed the message to Lisa when they met for lunch at a small cafe across town. Elena, this could be dangerous. What if it's Richard or Amanda trying to manipulate you? Or what if it's someone else entirely who has their own agenda? But what if it's someone who can help me understand what they're really planning, Lisa? I'm terrified that Richard is going to do something to hurt me or the baby, and I don't even know what I'm protecting us from. After much discussion, they decided that Elena would agree to meet the mysterious messenger, but only in a public place with Lisa nearby for safety. Elena texted back, suggesting they meet at the food court in the busy downtown shopping center the next afternoon. The person who approached Elena's table was not at all what she had expected. Amanda herself, the mistress who had been conspiring with Richard, slid into the seat across from Elena with a nervous expression. "Mrs. Martinez, thank you for meeting me. I know you have every reason to hate me, but I need you to know that Richard has been lying to both of us." Elena's first instinct was to leave immediately. This woman had been part of destroying her marriage and threatening her future. But something in Amanda's expression made her stay. "Why should I believe anything you say? You've been having an affair with my husband." "Because I just found out that Richard has no intention of leaving you for me. His plans don't include building a life with me. They include stealing your baby and disappearing." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. "What are you talking about? How could Richard steal my baby?" Amanda looked around nervously before leaning forward. "Richard has been planning this for months. He's been setting up financial structures that would give him complete control if you were to become incapacitated or if there were questions about the baby's parentage. But it's worse than that. Tell me everything." "Richard has been drugging your prenatal vitamins with mild sedatives to keep you compliant and unfocused. The genetic testing he's been arranging isn't for the baby's health. It's to establish documentation that could be used to question paternity later. And the adoption agency contract I found in his office suggests he's planning to have the baby taken from you immediately after birth." Elena felt the room spinning around her. The fatigue and mental fog she had been attributing to pregnancy might have been caused by Richard's manipulation. The very vitamins she took every day to keep her baby healthy had been used to control her. "Why are you telling me this? What's in it for you?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "Because I thought I was in love with a man who was trapped in an unhappy marriage. I thought we were building something real together. But Richard has been using me just like he's been using you. When I confronted him about the adoption papers, he laughed and told me I was just a convenient distraction to keep you from getting suspicious." Elena studied Amanda's face, looking for signs of deception. The woman seemed genuinely distressed, but Elena had learned not to trust anyone completely. "If what you're saying is true, then we both need to be very careful. Richard is clearly more dangerous than either of us realized. Mrs. Martinez, there's something else. The fertility clinic where you saw us, Richard has been working with someone there to falsify medical records. I think he's been planning to claim that the baby isn't his biological child as a way to avoid custody and financial responsibilities while still maintaining control through the trust structures." The elaborate nature of Richard's deception was becoming clearer, but it was also becoming more terrifying. Elena realized that she had been living with a man who was capable of extraordinary manipulation and betrayal. The loving husband who brought her flowers and worried about her health had been systematically destroying her life. "Amanda, I need proof of what you're telling me. If we're going to stop Richard, we need evidence that will hold up in court. I have copies of some documents, and I know where Richard keeps others. But if he suspects that I've betrayed him, both of our lives could be in danger." Elena spent the rest of that afternoon trying to process the magnitude of Richard's betrayal. The husband affair with Mistress had been just the beginning. Richard had been orchestrating a complex scheme to steal her child, control their finances, and leave her with nothing. That evening, Elena pretended to take her prenatal vitamins but instead saved them in a small bag to have tested for foreign substances. She also began documenting everything: Richard's behavior, his schedule, any unusual phone calls or meetings. As she lay in bed that night, listening to Richard's steady breathing beside her, Elena realized that she was sleeping next to a stranger. The man she had loved and trusted for 15 years was capable of drugging her, manipulating her pregnancy, and planning to steal their child. The midlife betrayal story she was living was worse than anything she could have imagined. But Elena was no longer the naive woman who had stumbled upon Richard's phone call at the medical center. She was becoming someone who could match his calculation with her own strategic thinking. The pregnant wife betrayed was preparing to become the pregnant wife who fought back with everything she had. The question now was whether she could gather enough evidence to stop Richard's plan before it was too late. With her due date still months away, Elena knew she had time to build her case, but she also knew that Richard was far ahead of her in his planning. The battle for her baby's future had begun, and Elena was determined to win. Elena sat in her car outside the medical testing facility, holding the small bag of prenatal vitamins she had been secretly collecting for the past week. Margaret Walsh had recommended the lab, assuring Elena that their analysis would be both thorough and confidential. As she walked into the building, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a line from which there would be no return. Mrs. Martinez, the lab technician, a young woman with kind eyes, greeted her at the reception desk. Ms. Walsh explained that you need these supplements tested for foreign substances. Yes, I have reason to believe they may have been tampered with. The words felt surreal coming out of Elena's mouth. Just weeks ago, she would never have imagined suspecting her husband of such calculated cruelty. We'll have the results for you within 48 hours. Is there a specific number where you can be reached confidentially? Elena provided her new cell phone number, a prepaid phone she had purchased to ensure Richard couldn't monitor her communications. Every aspect of her life now required this kind of careful planning and deception. As she drove home, Elena's mind wandered to the conversation she had scheduled with Dr. Patricia Chen for later that afternoon. Her new obstetrician had agreed to review all of Elena's medical records and test results to check for any irregularities or unauthorized procedures. The house felt different when Elena returned. Richard was in his office on a conference call, his voice carrying the confident tone he used when discussing major business deals. How many of those deals had been legitimate, and how many had been part of his scheme to restructure their finances? Elena went to the kitchen and began preparing lunch, but her hands were shaking as she chopped vegetables. The stress of the past few weeks was taking its toll, and she worried about the effect on her baby. She had to find a way to protect herself and her child without compromising her pregnancy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Can you meet tonight? I found something important." Elena hesitated before responding. Trusting Amanda felt dangerous, but the woman had provided valuable information so far. They arranged to meet at a small bookstore cafe in a part of town where Elena was unlikely to encounter anyone she knew. That afternoon, Dr. Chen's examination confirmed Elena's worst fears. Mrs. Martinez, there are several concerning elements in your medical file, Dr. Chen said, reviewing the records on her computer screen. First, there are notations about genetic testing that you never consented to. Second, there are medication entries that don't match what you've told me about your prenatal care routine. What kind of medications? Mild sedatives and mood stabilizers. Nothing that would harm the baby, but substances that could affect your cognitive function and emotional state. Has anyone other than yourself had access to your medications? Elena felt sick as she realized the implications. My husband handles all of our medical appointments and often picks up my prescriptions. He said he was being helpful, taking care of everything so I could focus on staying healthy. Mrs. Haas Martinez, I need to ask you directly, do you feel safe at home? Are you concerned about your well-being or your baby's safety? The question hung in the air as Elena struggled to find the words. How could she explain that the man she had loved and trusted for 15 years had been systematically drugging her while planning to steal their child? Dr. Chen, I think my husband has been medicating me without my knowledge as part of a larger plan to gain control over our assets and our baby. I'm working with an attorney to gather evidence, but I need to make sure my baby and I stay safe until this is resolved. Dr. Chen's expression grew grave. Elena, I'm going to recommend that you consider staying somewhere safe while we sort this out. I'm also going to prescribe new prenatal vitamins and medications that you'll pick up yourself from a pharmacy your husband doesn't know about. That evening, Elena met Amanda at the bookstore cafe. The other woman looked exhausted and frightened, constantly glancing around as if she expected Richard to appear at any moment. Elena, I found Richard's real plan, Amanda said, sliding a folder across the table. It's worse than we thought. The documents inside the folder made Elena's blood run cold. Richard had been working with a network of corrupt medical professionals and legal advisors to create a scenario where Elena would be declared mentally incompetent due to postpartum depression and drug dependency. The medications he had been giving her would be used as evidence of her instability. According to this plan, Amanda explained, Richard would gain emergency custody of the baby immediately after birth, claiming that you're unable to care for the child due to mental illness and substance abuse. The trust structures he set up would give him complete control over all assets, and you would be left with nothing. Elena studied the timeline outlined in the documents. Richard had been planning this betrayal for over a year, carefully putting all the pieces in place while maintaining the facade of a loving husband, preparing for their child's arrival. Amanda, how did you get these documents if Richard finds out you've taken them? I copied them from his private safe. I know the combination because he used to let me handle some of his business correspondence. But Elena, there's something else. Richard has been in contact with someone at the hospital where you're supposed to give birth. I think they're planning to separate you from the baby immediately after delivery. The horror of Richard's plan was becoming clear. He had manipulated every aspect of Elena's pregnancy to create conditions that would allow him to take their child and leave her powerless to fight back. We need to get this information to my attorney immediately, Elena said, photographing each document with her phone, and I need to change my birth plan. I can't deliver at the hospital Richard chose. As they left the cafe, Amanda grabbed Elena's arm. Be careful. Richard has been asking me questions about your behavior lately. I think he suspects that you know something. Elena drove home through the dark streets, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. She needed to accelerate her timeline for gathering evidence and building her legal case. If Richard suspected her investigation, he might move up his own schedule. The house was quiet when Elena arrived. Richard was apparently working late again, which gave her an opportunity to make some important phone calls. She contacted Margaret Walsh and Dr. Chen, arranging emergency meetings for the next day. When Richard finally came home, Elena was in bed pretending to sleep. She listened as he moved around their bedroom, noting how careful he was not to wake her. The man who had once been her loving partner now felt like a dangerous stranger sharing her space. The next morning brought the lab results Elena had been dreading but expecting. The prenatal vitamins contained mild sedatives and mood-altering substances that could explain the fatigue and mental fog she had been experiencing for months. This is criminal behavior, Margaret Walsh said, reviewing the lab report. Richard has been systematically drugging you without your consent. We can use this as evidence of abuse and manipulation. Elena felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that she finally had proof of Richard's betrayal, but terror at the realization of how vulnerable she had been. Margaret, I need to change everything immediately. My birth plan, my medical care, my living situation. Richard cannot be allowed to control any aspect of my delivery or recovery. I agree completely. I'm going to file for an emergency restraining order and request immediate changes to your medical care authorization. But Elena, you need to be prepared for Richard's reaction when he realizes his plan has been discovered. That afternoon, Elena packed a bag with essential items and moved into Lisa's guest room. She told Richard she needed space to think about their relationship, without revealing the true extent of her knowledge about his scheme. Richard's response was calculated and manipulative, exactly what Elena had come to expect. Darling, I understand you're emotional right now. Pregnancy hormones can make everything feel overwhelming. Why don't you take a few days to relax, and then we can talk about whatever is troubling you? The condescending tone that Elena had once interpreted as caring now sounded patronizing and controlling. Richard was still trying to manipulate her, even as his carefully constructed plan was beginning to crumble. From the safety of Lisa's home, Elena began rebuilding her life on her own terms. She opened new bank accounts, changed her insurance beneficiaries, and established a new support network of medical and legal professionals who had no connection to Richard. But even as Elena took control of her situation, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's most dangerous moves were yet to come. A man who could plan such an elaborate betrayal wouldn't give up easily when his scheme was discovered. The baby kicked strongly against Elena's ribs as she sat in Lisa's living room, reviewing legal documents and preparing for the battle ahead. She placed her hands protectively over her belly, making a silent promise to her unborn child. "I won't let him hurt you," she whispered. "Whatever he's planning, we're going to be ready for it." But deep down, Elena knew that Richard's capacity for deception and manipulation went far beyond what she had discovered so far. The man who had been drugging her and planning to steal their child was capable of anything. As she prepared for sleep in Lisa's guest room, Elena couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Richard was hiding. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with a simple affair had evolved into something far more sinister and complex. The pregnant wife betrayed was learning to fight back, but she was also learning that the battle for her child's future would be more difficult and dangerous than she had ever imagined. The shadows of Richard's past were still hiding secrets that could threaten everything Elena was working to protect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and revelations, but tonight, Elena allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in months' hope. She was no longer alone in this fight, and she was no longer the naive woman who had trusted Richard completely. The heartbreaking family drama that Richard had orchestrated was about to become his own downfall. Elena was determined to make sure of that. Elena's phone rang at 6 in the morning, jolting her awake in Lisa's guest room. The caller ID showed Margaret Walsh's office number, which could only mean urgent news. "Elena, we have a problem." Margaret's voice was tense with concern. "Richard filed legal documents yesterday claiming that you've abandoned your marital home and are exhibiting erratic behavior due to pregnancy-induced mental instability. He's requesting emergency custody provisions and medical decision-making authority." Elena sat up in bed, her heart racing. "How can he do that? I only moved out 3 days ago, and I told him I needed space to think. He's using your departure as evidence that you're unable to make rational decisions. Combined with the medical records from Dr. Harrison's office, which apparently document concerns about your emotional state, Richard is building a case that you're unfit to care for the baby." The calculated nature of Richard's response shouldn't have surprised Elena, but the speed and thoroughness of his legal maneuvering was breathtaking. Even knowing about his capacity for deception, she had underestimated his ability to manipulate the legal system. "Margaret, what does this mean for my case? Can he actually gain custody before the baby is even born?" "Not if we fight back immediately. I'm filing counter motions today, and we're going to present our evidence of his systematic drugging and financial manipulation." "But Elena, you need to be prepared for this to get very ugly very quickly." After ending the call, Elena sat in the quiet guest room, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her. The stress of the legal battle was affecting both of them, and she worried about the impact on her pregnancy. Lisa appeared in the doorway with a cup of herbal tea and a concerned expression. "I couldn't help but overhear. How bad is it?" "Richard is claiming I'm mentally unstable and unfit to be a mother. He's turning my decision to protect myself and the baby into evidence against me." "Elena, we knew he would fight back, but you have evidence of his crimes. You have proof that he was drugging you and planning to steal the baby." Elena wished she could share Lisa's confidence, but she was learning that the legal system didn't always prioritize truth over presentation. Richard had resources, connections, and a team of professionals who had been helping him build his case for months. That afternoon, Elena met with Dr. Chen for a comprehensive medical evaluation that would document her actual mental and physical state. The contrast between Dr. Chen's caring professionalism and Dr. Harrison's dismissive attitude was striking. Elena, your test results show no signs of mental instability or substance abuse beyond the sedatives that were administered without your knowledge. Dr. Chen explained, your pregnancy is progressing normally, and there are no medical reasons to question your fitness as a mother. Will your evaluation be enough to counter Richard's claims? It should be, especially combined with the evidence of unauthorized medication. But I need to warn you that Richard's legal team has been contacting medical professionals in the area, apparently trying to find practitioners who will support their narrative about your mental state. Elena felt a chill of fear. Richard's network of corrupt professionals was broader than she had realized, and his willingness to manipulate the medical community showed the extent of his desperation. That evening, Amanda called with disturbing news. Elena, Richard knows you have copies of his documents. He's been going through his files, and he realizes that someone has been in his safe. Does he suspect you? I don't think so. Not yet. But he's been asking me to help him monitor your activities. He wants me to find out where you're staying and what you're planning. Elena felt the walls closing in around her. Richard was mobilizing his resources to counter her investigation, and his ability to manipulate people like Amanda showed how dangerous he could be. Amanda, you need to be very careful. If Richard discovers that you've been helping me, he might hurt you. I know the risks, but I can't let him destroy your life the way he's destroyed mine. Elena, there's something else. Richard has been in contact with someone at the hospital where you're supposed to deliver. I think they're planning to drug you during labor and claim that complications require separating you from the baby. The image of being helpless and sedated while Richard took her child was Elena's worst nightmare. She had changed her birth plan and selected a different hospital, but Richard's connections might extend beyond the facility he had originally chosen. That night, Elena made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. She would leave the city entirely and establish herself somewhere Richard couldn't find her until after the baby was born. Lisa, I need to disappear until this baby is safely in my arms, Elena explained as they sat in the living room making plans. Richard has too many connections here, too many ways to manipulate the situation. Where will you go? How will you manage alone? Elena had been thinking about this question all day. I have a cousin in Portland who runs a small law practice. She specializes in family law and domestic abuse cases. If I can get there safely, I can establish residency and have the baby where Richard has no influence. The plan was risky and would require Elena to start over in a new city while heavily pregnant. But staying in Richard's sphere of influence felt even more dangerous. The next morning, Elena met with Margaret Walsh to discuss the legal implications of leaving the state. Elena, if you relocate now, Richard's attorneys will use it as further evidence of your instability and unfitness as a mother. But if you stay here, you're vulnerable to his medical and legal manipulation. What would you do in my situation? Margaret was quiet for a long moment, weighing the options. If I were facing what you're facing, with a man who had been systematically drugging me and planning to steal my child, I would probably run too. But we need to do this legally and strategically. They spent the morning crafting legal documents that would justify Elena's relocation as necessary for her safety and the baby's well-being. Margaret would file motions in both states to ensure that Elena's rights were protected regardless of where she gave birth. That afternoon, Elena received a call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but the message was terrifying. Mrs. Martinez, you don't know me, but I work at the genetics lab your husband has been using. He's planning to falsify paternity tests to claim that your baby isn't his biological child. But there's something else you need to know about your husband's past. Elena's hands trembled as she listened to the caller explain that Richard had been involved in a similar scheme years before, with another woman who had died under suspicious circumstances during childbirth. Mrs. Martinez, your husband's first wife didn't die from natural complications. The hospital records were falsified, and Richard gained control of their assets and their child through fraudulent legal documents. The revelation that Richard might have been responsible for another woman's death sent Elena into a panic. If he was capable of murder, then her own life and her baby's life were in immediate danger. Elena called Margaret immediately, explaining the new information. Elena, if this is true, then we're not just dealing with fraud and manipulation. We might be dealing with a man who has killed before to get what he wants. Margaret, I have to leave immediately. I can't wait for legal protection if Richard is planning to hurt me or the baby. Within hours, Elena was in her car driving toward Portland, with only the clothes she could pack quickly and the evidence she had gathered against Richard. Lisa had insisted on driving with her, unwilling to let Elena make the dangerous journey alone. As they drove through the night, Elena felt her baby moving restlessly, as if sensing the urgency of their escape. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering reassurances to her unborn child. "We're going to be safe," she promised. "Your daddy may be a monster, but I'm going to protect you from him." But even as Elena drove toward what she hoped would be safety, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's reach might extend farther than she realized. A man who could manipulate medical records, falsify legal documents, and possibly commit murder wouldn't be stopped by a simple change of location. The pregnant wife betrayed was becoming the pregnant wife in hiding. But the heartbreaking family drama she was living was far from over. Elena was learning that escaping a man like Richard would require more than just distance. It would require completely rebuilding her identity and her life. As dawn broke over the highway ahead of them, Elena made a silent vow. No matter what Richard had done in the past or what he was planning for the future, she would find a way to protect her child and expose his crimes. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with a simple affair had evolved into a fight for survival. Elena was no longer just protecting her marriage or her finances. She was fighting for her life and her baby's future. But Richard's capacity for evil was deeper than Elena had imagined, and the battle ahead would test every ounce of strength and courage she possessed. The shadows of his past held secrets that could destroy everything Elena was working to build, but they might also hold the key to bringing him to justice. The road ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but Elena was no longer the naive woman who had trusted Richard completely. She was becoming someone who could match his calculation with her own determination to survive and protect her child. Elena's cousin, Rebecca Chen, welcomed them into her Portland home with the kind of fierce protectiveness that runs deep in family bonds. As a successful family law attorney who specialized in domestic abuse cases, Rebecca immediately understood the gravity of Elena's situation. "Elena, honey, you did the right thing getting out of there," Rebecca said as they sat in her comfortable living room, reviewing the evidence Elena had brought. "What Richard has been doing isn't just betrayal. It's systematic abuse designed to steal your child and your assets." Lisa squeezed Elena's hand as they watched Rebecca examine the documents with a trained legal eye. After 18 hours of driving, Elena felt emotionally and physically drained, but she also felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks, a sense of safety. "Rebecca, can Richard legally force me to return home? Will the courts make me go back?" "Not if we establish that you fled due to credible threats to your safety and your baby's well-being. The evidence of drugging alone should be enough to justify your relocation. But the information about his first wife's suspicious death changes everything." Rebecca's investigative team had already begun looking into Richard's past, and what they were finding painted a picture of a man whose capacity for manipulation and violence went back decades. Elena, Richard's first wife, Sarah, died during what was officially recorded as a complicated childbirth, but the medical examiner's notes contained several irregularities. There were questions about medications in her system that weren't prescribed for her labor, and the timeline of events doesn't match the hospital's official records. Elena felt sick as she realized that Richard's current plan might be a repeat of something he had successfully accomplished before. "Rebecca, do you think he killed her?" "I think he created conditions that led to her death, just like he was planning to do with you. But this time, we're going to stop him." Over the next few days, Elena worked with Rebecca's team to build a comprehensive legal case that would expose Richard's crimes and protect her rights as a mother. The process was exhausting, but Elena found strength in finally taking active steps to fight back. Dr. Maria Santos, the obstetrician Rebecca recommended, confirmed that Elena and the baby were healthy despite the stress of the past few weeks. Your pregnancy is progressing normally, and there's no reason you can't have a safe, natural delivery here in Portland. Elena scheduled her delivery at a hospital where Richard had no connections, with medical professionals who understood the importance of protecting her from his manipulation. But even as Elena built her new support network, Richard was mobilizing his resources to track her down and counter her legal actions. Margaret Walsh called with disturbing updates from the court proceedings back home. Elena, Richard has hired one of the city's most expensive legal teams, and they're claiming that you've kidnapped his unborn child by leaving the state without permission. How can they claim kidnapping when the baby isn't even born yet? It's a legal stretch, but they're arguing that by taking the fetus across state lines without the father's consent, you've committed a form of child abduction. It's ridiculous, but it shows how far Richard is willing to go. Elena felt the familiar surge of panic that had become her constant companion. Even hundreds of miles away from Richard, his ability to manipulate the legal system continued to threaten her freedom. Margaret, what does this mean for my case? Can they force me to return? Not if we can prove that you fled due to credible threats. Rebecca and I have been coordinating our legal strategies, and we have strong evidence to support your position. That afternoon, Elena received a call that made her blood run cold. Richard himself was on the line, his voice carrying the same manipulative charm that had once made her feel loved and protected. Elena, darling, this has gone far enough. You're putting our baby at risk with this emotional behavior. Come home so we can work this out like adults. Elena's hand trembled as she gripped the phone. Richard, I know what you've been planning. I know about the drugging, the false medical records, everything. Richard's laugh was cold and calculating. Elena, you're obviously suffering from severe pregnancy-induced paranoia. The medications you've been taking have clearly affected your judgment. Come home before you do something that hurts our child. The way Richard continued to manipulate and gaslight her, even after his plans had been exposed, showed Elena how dangerous he truly was. This wasn't a man who would accept defeat gracefully. I'm not coming back. Richard, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you really are. Elena, you're making a serious mistake. I have resources and connections that you can't imagine. If you continue down this path, you'll lose everything, including our baby. The threat was clear, and Elena felt a chill of fear as she realized that Richard's pursuit was just beginning. That evening, Rebecca called an emergency meeting with her entire legal team. Elena, we've discovered something that changes everything. Richard has been in contact with corrupt officials in multiple states, building a network that could help him track you down and manipulate custody proceedings wherever you are. How is that possible? How can one person have so much influence? Richard's wealth and business connections give him access to professionals who are willing to bend rules for the right price. We're dealing with systematic corruption that goes beyond simple divorce proceedings. Elena felt overwhelmed by the scope of Richard's power and influence. How could one pregnant woman fight against a network of corrupt professionals backed by unlimited financial resources? Rebecca, what if I can't protect my baby? What if Richard finds a way to take the child regardless of what we do? Elena, we're not going to let that happen. But I need you to understand that this battle is going to be more difficult and more public than you expected. Richard's team is going to attack your character, your mental state, and your fitness as a mother. Are you prepared for that? Elena thought about the naive woman she had been just weeks ago, trusting and dependent on Richard for everything. That woman was gone forever, replaced by someone who was learning to be strategic, suspicious, and fiercely protective. I'm ready to fight for my child, no matter what it takes. Over the next week, Elena watched as her private tragedy became a public spectacle. Richard's legal team leaked information to sympathetic media outlets, painting Elena as an unstable woman who had abandoned her husband and was endangering her unborn child through reckless behavior. The headlines were devastating. Pregnant wife flees state in apparent mental health crisis, and millionaire husband fights for custody of unborn child. Elena cried as she read the articles that portrayed Richard as a concerned father, fighting to protect his child from an irrational mother. The same man who had been systematically drugging her was being presented as the responsible parent. Elena, this is exactly what Richard wants, Rebecca explained as they reviewed the media coverage. He's trying to create a public narrative that supports his legal claims about your mental instability. How do we fight back against this? How do we tell the truth when he has so much money to spend on manipulating the story? We document everything. We build our case methodically, and we wait for the right moment to present our evidence. Richard's arrogance will eventually work against him, but Elena wondered if she could maintain her strength and sanity long enough for justice to prevail. The stress of the legal battle was taking its toll on her pregnancy, and she worried about the effect on her baby's development. Dr. Santos recommended additional monitoring to ensure that the pregnancy remained healthy despite the emotional trauma Elena was experiencing. Stress can affect fetal development, but your baby appears to be thriving despite everything you've been through. As Elena lay in the ultrasound room, watching her baby move on the screen, she made a silent promise. I won't let your father destroy our lives. Whatever it takes, I'm going to protect you. But even as Elena prepared for the legal battles ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's most dangerous moves were yet to come. A man who could orchestrate such an elaborate deception wouldn't give up easily when his plans were discovered. The pregnant wife betrayed was learning to fight back, but she was also learning that the battle for her child's future would test every ounce of courage and determination she possessed. The heartbreaking family drama that Richard had created was about to reach its peak, and Elena could only hope that she would be strong enough to survive what was coming next. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with a simple affair had evolved into a fight for survival that would determine not just Elena's future, but her baby's entire life. Elena's world exploded into chaos when Amanda called at 3 in the morning, her voice shaking with terror and rage. Elena, you need to see the news. Richard has destroyed both of us. Elena stumbled to her laptop, her pregnant belly making it difficult to move quickly. What she found online made her sink into the nearest chair with horror. A video had been leaked to social media showing Amanda and Elena meeting at the bookstore cafe, with edited audio that made their conversation sound like two unstable women conspiring against an innocent man. The video had gone viral overnight, with hashtags like Preggy Wife Drama and Crazy Mistress Conspiracy trending across multiple platforms. Thousands of comments attacked Elena's character, questioned her mental state, and defended Richard as a victim of feminine manipulation. Amanda, how did they get this video? Were we being followed? Richard must have had us under surveillance the entire time. Elena, they edited the audio to make it sound like we were plotting to falsely accuse him of crimes he never committed. Elena read through the comments on the viral posts, each one more devastating than the last. Strangers were calling her an unfit mother, a gold digger, and a woman too unstable to raise a child. The carefully crafted narrative painted Richard as a successful businessman whose pregnant wife had mental problems and whose mistress was helping her fabricate evidence. Rebecca appeared in the guest room doorway, having been awakened by Elena's distressed phone conversation. What's happening? Elena showed her the viral video and the social media explosion that had erupted around it. Rebecca's expression grew grimmer as she realized the implications. Elena, this is a sophisticated disinformation campaign. Richard's team has weaponized social media to destroy your credibility before our case even gets to court. The morning news broadcast picked up the story, with legal commentators discussing the unusual case of a pregnant woman making wild accusations against her husband. Elena watched in horror as her private pain became public entertainment. Her phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, social media influencers, and strangers who had opinions about her situation. Elena had to turn off her phone entirely to escape the harassment. Rebecca, how do we fight back against this? How do we tell the truth when the lies are spreading so much faster? We document everything and prepare for a long battle. Richard is trying to win in the court of public opinion because he knows his legal case is weak. But Elena, I need you to be prepared for this to get much worse before it gets better. That afternoon brought devastating news from Margaret Walsh. Elena, Richard's media campaign is affecting our legal proceedings. The judge in our custody case has expressed concerns about the circus atmosphere surrounding the case and is considering imposing restrictions that could limit our ability to present evidence. Elena felt the walls closing in around her. Richard's wealth and connections were allowing him to manipulate not just social media, but potentially the legal system itself. The viral video had been viewed millions of times, and Elena discovered that Richard's team had created fake social media accounts to amplify negative comments about her character. The sophisticated nature of the campaign showed that Richard had been planning this public destruction for as long as he had been planning the private betrayal. Elena's former friends began calling, their voices filled with confusion and concern. Elena, is it true what they're saying about you on the news? Are you really having a mental breakdown? Did you really abandon your husband and run away because you're having paranoid delusions? Each conversation was a fresh wound as Elena realized that Richard's narrative was being accepted by people who had known her for years. The loving wife and devoted friend they remembered was being replaced in their minds by the unstable woman portrayed in the viral video. Dr. Santos insisted on additional monitoring after Elena's blood pressure spiked during a routine appointment. Elena, the stress you're experiencing is reaching dangerous levels. We need to consider measures to protect both you and the baby. Dr. Santos, I can't let Richard win by claiming that stress is making me unfit. I have to keep fighting. Fighting doesn't mean destroying your health. We need to find ways to manage this situation that don't put your pregnancy at risk. That evening, Elena discovered that the harassment had escalated beyond social media. Someone had posted her new address online, and strangers were appearing at Rebecca's house, taking photos and demanding interviews. We need to move you to a safe house, Rebecca said after the third group of amateur journalists showed up at her front door. Richard's campaign has made you a public target. Elena felt like she was losing everything, her privacy, her reputation, her sense of safety. The man who had once been her loving husband was systematically destroying her life with a precision that took her breath away. But the worst was yet to come. That night, Elena received a package at Rebecca's house with no return address. Inside was a collection of forged documents that purported to show Elena's history of mental illness, drug abuse, and unstable behavior. These are completely fabricated, Rebecca said, examining the fake medical records and psychological evaluations. But they're sophisticated enough that people might believe them if they're presented as evidence. Elena stared at the documents that painted her as a woman with a long history of psychiatric problems and substance abuse. Richard had created an entire false narrative about her past to support his claims about her current mental state. Rebecca, how can he create fake documents like this? How is it legal? It's not legal, but proving that these documents are forged will take time and resources. Meanwhile, Richard can use them to support his custody claims and damage your credibility. Elena's world felt like it was collapsing around her. The public humiliation, the legal manipulation, and the systematic destruction of her reputation were taking a toll that she wasn't sure she could survive. The baby kicked strongly against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. Elena placed her hands on her belly, drawing strength from the life growing inside her. I won't let him win, she whispered to her unborn child. No matter what he does to me, I won't let him hurt you. But as Elena prepared for sleep in yet another temporary safe house, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's capacity for destruction went beyond anything she had imagined. The man who had once brought her flowers and worried about her health was proving to be a monster who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The pregnant wife betrayed had become the pregnant wife under siege, fighting a battle that seemed impossible to win. But Elena was discovering reserves of strength and determination that she never knew she possessed. The heartbreaking family drama that Richard had orchestrated was destroying Elena's old life completely. but it was also forging her into someone new, someone who could survive anything and protect her child at any cost. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with a simple affair had become a public spectacle that would determine not just Elena's future, but her baby's chance at a life free from Richard's manipulation and control. As Elena drifted off to sleep, she held on to one thought: the truth would eventually prevail. No matter how much money Richard spent trying to bury it, the question was whether Elena would survive long enough to see justice done. 3 weeks after the viral video destroyed Elena's public reputation, an unexpected ally emerged from the chaos. Dr. Marcus Williams, a forensic psychiatrist who had been following the case through media coverage, contacted Rebecca with an offer that could change everything. "Miss Chen, I've been analyzing the documents and video evidence that have been circulating about your client's case," Dr. Williams explained during their video conference. "The psychological profile being presented doesn't match the behavioral patterns I'm observing in Mrs. Martinez's actual communications and actions." Elena sat beside Rebecca, cautiously hopeful as she listened to the first professional opinion that supported her side of the story. "Dr. Williams, what specifically makes you question the narrative that's been presented about Elena's mental state?" The sophistication of her legal strategy, the coherence of her evidence gathering, and the rational way she's responded to systematic abuse all indicate a woman who is functioning at a high level despite extraordinary stress. The claims of paranoid delusions and mental instability are inconsistent with her documented behavior. Elena felt tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. After weeks of having her sanity questioned by strangers on the internet and professionals in Richard's network, someone finally saw the truth about her situation. "Dr. Williams, would you be willing to conduct an independent evaluation and provide expert testimony about Elena's actual mental state?" "Absolutely. But I also want to analyze the allegedly historical medical records that have been circulating. Based on my preliminary review, several of those documents show signs of recent fabrication." Rebecca's investigative team had been working around the clock to expose the fraudulent elements of Richard's campaign, and Dr. Williams's expertise could provide the scientific credibility they needed. Over the next few days, Elena underwent a comprehensive psychological evaluation that documented her actual mental health status. The process was exhausting but liberating, as Dr. Williams's assessment confirmed what Elena knew to be true about herself. "Elena, your psychological profile shows a woman who has responded to systematic abuse with remarkable resilience and strategic thinking," Dr. Williams explained as he reviewed his findings. "There are no indicators of the mental instability that has been alleged in the media coverage. But even as Elena built her case with credible professional support, Richard's team was preparing new attacks. Margaret Walsh called with disturbing news from the court proceedings. "Elena, Richard's attorneys have filed motions claiming that your psychological evaluation is invalid because you're in hiding and unable to be properly assessed. They're arguing that your isolation is proof of paranoid behavior." Elena felt the familiar frustration of watching Richard twist every positive development into evidence against her. His ability to manipulate the legal system seemed unlimited. "Margaret, how can they claim that protecting myself from harassment is evidence of mental illness? It's a legal stretch, but they're trying to create doubt about any evidence that supports your position. Richard's strategy is to make every aspect of your behavior seem suspicious or irrational." That afternoon brought news that initially seemed like a victory. Amanda had agreed to testify about Richard's manipulation and the evidence she had uncovered, providing corroboration for Elena's claims about his systematic deception. "Amanda's testimony could be crucial," Rebecca explained as they reviewed Amanda's statement. "She can confirm the drugging, the fraudulent medical records, and Richard's statements about his plans for the baby." Elena felt hopeful for the first time in weeks. With Dr. Williams's psychological evaluation and Amanda's testimony, they finally had professional and witness support for the truth about Richard's crimes. But the hope was short-lived. The next morning, Elena woke to devastating news. Amanda had been found dead in her apartment, apparently from a drug overdose. The woman who had risked everything to help Elena expose Richard's crimes was gone. "Elena, I'm so sorry," Rebecca said, her voice heavy with grief and concern. "Amanda's death is being investigated as an accidental overdose, but the timing is extremely suspicious." Elena felt sick with guilt and fear. Amanda had died trying to help her, and now Elena was left without the witness testimony that could have corroborated her claims about Richard's systematic abuse. "Rebecca, do you think Richard killed her? Is he capable of murder? I think Amanda knew things that could have destroyed Richard's case, and now she's conveniently dead. Whether he killed her directly or created conditions that led to her death, the result is the same." Elena's hands trembled as she realized that she might be next. If Richard was willing to kill Amanda to silence her, Elena's own life could be in danger. "We need to increase your security immediately," Rebecca said, already making calls to arrange additional protection. "If Richard is eliminating witnesses, you're the primary target." That evening, Elena sat in her new safe house, protected by security guards but feeling more isolated than ever. The baby moved restlessly inside her, and Elena wondered if her child would ever know a life free from Richard's influence. Dr. Santos arrived for an emergency checkup, concerned about the effect of Amanda's death on Elena's pregnancy. "Elena, your blood pressure is dangerously high, and the stress you're experiencing could trigger premature labor." "Dr. Santos, I can't stop fighting now. If I give up, Richard will take my baby and probably kill me too." "I understand, but we need to manage this situation carefully. Your baby's health depends on your ability to stay strong and healthy." Elena felt trapped between the need to protect herself from Richard's violence and the need to protect her baby from the stress of the ongoing battle. Every choice seemed to involve unbearable risks. The next day brought another apparent victory that Elena had learned to distrust. Margaret Walsh called with news that seemed too good to be true. "Elena, Richard's attorneys have contacted me about a possible settlement. They're offering joint custody, financial support, and a public statement acknowledging that the allegations against you were exaggerated." Elena's first instinct was suspicion. "Margaret, why would Richard suddenly want to settle? What's the catch?" "The settlement would require you to sign a non-disclosure agreement and drop all criminal charges related to the drugging and fraud. Essentially, Richard would escape legal consequences in exchange for shared custody." Elena felt torn between the desire to end the exhausting battle and the need to see Richard held accountable for his crimes. But with Amanda dead and the media still portraying Elena as unstable, the settlement might be the best outcome she could achieve. "Margaret, what do you think I should do?" "Elena, I think this offer is a trap. Richard is offering just enough to make you consider it, but the terms would leave him free to continue manipulating the situation after the agreement is signed." Rebecca agreed with Margaret's assessment. "Elena, non-disclosure agreements can be used to silence victims and protect abusers. If you sign this, Richard could claim that your previous accusations were false and use that against you in future custody disputes." Elena realized that even Richard's apparent willingness to compromise was another form of manipulation. He was offering her a choice between limited protection now and complete vulnerability later. That night, as Elena prepared for sleep in her secured room, she felt the baby kicking strongly against her ribs. The child who should have been a source of pure joy had become the center of a battle that threatened to destroy everything Elena cared about. But as she placed her hands on her belly, Elena felt a surge of determination that surprised her with its intensity. She had come too far and survived too much to accept Richard's manipulative settlement offer. "I won't make deals with monsters," she whispered to her unborn child. "We're going to fight until the truth comes out, no matter what it costs." Elena knew that rejecting Richard's settlement offer would escalate the battle to new levels of danger and complexity, but she also knew that accepting it would mean living in fear for the rest of her life, always wondering when Richard would strike again. The pregnant wife betrayed was about to become the pregnant wife who refused to surrender, even when surrender seemed like the safer choice. The heartbreaking family drama that Richard had created was entering its most dangerous phase. But Elena was discovering that she had the courage to face whatever came next. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with a simple affair would not end with a compromised settlement that protected the abuser and silenced the victim. Elena was ready to see this battle through to its conclusion. No matter how much it cost her, the truth about Richard's crimes would be exposed, and her child would grow up free from his manipulation and control. Elena's labor began during a thunderstorm that seemed to mirror the turbulence of her life over the past months. Dr. Santos had moved her to a private birthing center outside Portland, where Elena could deliver her baby safely away from Richard's network of corrupt medical professionals. "Elena, you're doing beautifully," Dr. Santos said as another contraction peaked. "Your baby should be here within the next few hours." Rebecca stood beside the bed, providing emotional support while monitoring security updates on her phone. Even in labor, Elena couldn't escape the reality that Richard might still try to interfere with her child's birth. "Any word from the courthouse?" Elena asked between contractions, thinking about the emergency custody hearing that was scheduled for later that week. "Elena, focus on bringing your baby into the world safely. We'll handle Richard's legal maneuvers after you've recovered." But even as Elena tried to concentrate on the birth process, her mind kept racing with fears about what would happen once her child was born. Would Richard's team try to claim the baby immediately? Would corrupt officials attempt to remove the child from her custody? As the hours passed and Elena's labor progressed, she found strength in the network of support she had built around herself. Dr. Santos provided expert medical care, Rebecca offered legal protection, and Lisa had flown in from their hometown to provide emotional support. "Elena, I can see the baby's head," Dr. Santos announced. "Just a few more pushes and you'll meet your child." Elena drew on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed, pushing through the pain and exhaustion to bring her baby safely into the world. When Dr. Santos placed the crying infant on Elena's chest, she felt a surge of protective love that overwhelmed every other emotion. "It's a girl," Dr. Santos said with a smile. "A beautiful, healthy baby girl." Elena looked down at her daughter's tiny face and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it took her breath away. This perfect little being was worth every sacrifice Elena had made and every battle she had fought. "Hello, Sophia," Elena whispered, having chosen the name for its meaning of wisdom. "I'm your mama, and I'm going to protect you from everything." As Elena held her daughter for the first time, she felt something shift inside herself. The woman who had discovered Richard's betrayal in a doctor's office months ago was gone forever, replaced by someone who had been forged by adversity into an unbreakable protector. "Elena, we need to complete the birth certificate and legal documentation immediately," Rebecca said gently. "Before Richard's team has a chance to interfere." Elena understood the urgency. Every moment that passed without proper legal documentation was a moment that Richard could exploit to challenge her parental rights. Dr. Santos completed the medical paperwork, while Rebecca handled the legal requirements, ensuring that Elena's rights as Sophia's mother were properly established. The baby's birth certificate listed Elena as the mother and left the father section blank, pending the resolution of the ongoing legal battles. "Elena, you have 48 hours before we need to notify the court about Sophia's birth," Rebecca explained. "We're going to use that time to strengthen our legal position and prepare for Richard's response." Elena spent those precious first 2 days bonding with her daughter in the security of the birthing center. Sophia was a content baby who seemed to sense her mother's love and protection. When Elena held her, the chaos of the outside world faded away, leaving only the pure connection between mother and child. But the reprieve was brief. On the third day, Margaret Walsh called with news that Elena had been expecting but dreading. "Elena, Richard has filed emergency motions demanding immediate access to the baby and claiming that you're an unfit mother who has kidnapped his child. He's also demanding a court-ordered DNA test to establish paternity." Elena looked down at Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms and felt a surge of protective fury. "Margaret, Richard has no right to this baby. He lost any claim to fatherhood when he tried to destroy us." "Elena, Legally, he still has potential parental rights until a court determines otherwise. We need to prepare for a custody battle that could determine Sophia's entire future. Dr. Santos recommended that Elena and Sophia remain at the birthing center for another week to ensure their health and safety. The facility had excellent security and could provide medical care if needed. Elena, I'm concerned about the stress you're experiencing so soon after giving birth. Dr. Santos explained. Postpartum recovery requires rest and emotional stability, but I understand that you're facing extraordinary circumstances. Elena appreciated Dr. Santos' concern, but she knew that rest and stability were luxuries she couldn't afford, while Richard was mobilizing his resources to steal her child. That afternoon, Elena received an unexpected call from Dr. Marcus Williams, the forensic psychiatrist who had evaluated her mental state. Elena, congratulations on your daughter's birth. I've been following the legal developments, and I have some information that might help your case. Dr. Williams, what have you discovered? I've been analyzing the medical records related to Richard's first wife's death, and I've found evidence that the hospital documents were falsified. The medications listed in her toxicology report don't match the drugs that were actually administered during her labor. Elena felt a chill of horror mixed with hope. If Dr. Williams could prove that Richard had been involved in his first wife's death, it would expose him as a murderer and protect Sophia from his influence. Dr. Williams, can you present this evidence in court? I'm preparing a comprehensive report that documents the inconsistencies in the medical records. Combined with the evidence of systematic abuse in your case, it should establish a pattern of dangerous behavior that puts Sophia at risk. Elena felt hopeful for the first time since Sophia's birth. With Dr. Williams's evidence and Rebecca's legal expertise, they might finally be able to expose Richard's crimes and protect Sophia from his manipulation. That evening, as Elena nursed Sophia in the quiet of the birthing center, she reflected on the transformation she had undergone over the past months. The naive woman who had trusted Richard completely was gone, replaced by someone who could navigate complex legal battles and protect her child from dangerous manipulation. Sophia, your daddy is a bad man who tried to hurt us, Elena whispered to her sleeping daughter. But I'm going to make sure he never hurts you. You're going to grow up safe and loved, no matter what I have to do to protect you. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your beautiful daughter. I hope you're both enjoying your time together, because it won't last long. See you in court, Richard. The message sent a chill through Elena's body, but it also strengthened her resolve. Richard's arrogance and cruelty would ultimately be his downfall. Elena was no longer the frightened woman who had fled in the night. She was a mother protecting her child, and there was nothing more dangerous in the world. The next morning brought encouraging news from Rebecca's investigative team. Elena, we've uncovered financial records that show Richard has been bribing medical professionals and court officials for years. The corruption goes deeper than we realized, but it also means we can expose his entire network. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction at the thought of Richard's corrupt empire crumbling around him. The man who had used his wealth and connections to manipulate the system would finally face justice for his crimes. Rebecca, how long before we can present this evidence in court? We're requesting an emergency hearing for next week. Elena, this is going to be the battle of our lives, but I think we can win. As Elena prepared for the legal confrontation that would determine her daughter's future, she felt a strength and determination that surprised her. The pregnant wife betrayed had become the mother who would stop at nothing to protect her child. The heartbreaking family drama that Richard had orchestrated was about to reach its climax, but Elena was ready for whatever came next. She had survived Richard's systematic abuse, public humiliation, and violent threats. Now she would survive his final attempt to steal her daughter and destroy her life. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with a simple affair was about to end with Elena's complete victory over the man who had tried to destroy her. Sophia would grow up knowing that her mother had fought the forces of evil and won, proving that love and determination could overcome any obstacle. Elena looked down at her sleeping daughter and made a promise that came from the depths of her soul. I will never let anyone hurt you. Sophia, your mother is stronger than she ever knew, and I'm going to prove it to the world." The courtroom was packed with media, legal professionals, and curious observers drawn by the sensational story that had dominated social media for weeks. Elena sat beside Rebecca and Margaret, holding Sophia carefully as they prepared for the custody hearing that would determine her daughter's future. Judge Patricia Morrison, a veteran family court judge known for her fairness and intolerance of legal manipulation, reviewed the extensive case files before calling the proceedings to order. This case involves serious allegations of systematic abuse, fraud, and endangerment of a minor child. Judge Morrison announced, "I want to make it clear that I will not tolerate any theatrics or media manipulation in my courtroom." Elena felt encouraged by the judge's stern tone and professional demeanor. Unlike some of the officials Richard had influenced, Judge Morrison seemed immune to his charm and manipulation. Richard's legal team, led by the expensive attorney Harrison Burke, presented their case first. They portrayed Elena as an unstable woman who had fled the state due to pregnancy-induced paranoia and was now making false accusations to gain advantage in a custody dispute. "Your Honor, Mr. Martinez is a successful businessman and devoted father who has been systematically alienated from his child by a woman suffering from severe postpartum mental illness," Burke argued. "The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Martinez has fabricated elaborate conspiracy theories to justify her irrational behavior." Elena watched Richard sitting confidently at the defendant's table, his expression carrying the same manipulative charm that had once made her feel loved and protected. But now she could see the calculation behind every gesture, the coldness behind his concerned expression. When Rebecca stood to present Elena's case, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically. "Your Honor, Mrs. Martinez is not a delusional woman making false accusations. She is a victim who has survived systematic abuse designed to steal her child and her assets." Rebecca began, "The evidence we are about to present will show that Mr. Martinez has engaged in criminal behavior that puts both mother and child at serious risk." Rebecca methodically presented the evidence. Elena had gathered the lab results showing unauthorized medication in her prenatal vitamins, the fraudulent trust documents designed to steal her assets, and the forged medical records created to support false claims about her mental state. "Dr. Williams, please explain your analysis of the medical records submitted by Mr. Martinez's legal team," Rebecca requested. Dr. Williams took the witness stand with the professional authority that comes from decades of forensic experience. "Your Honor, my analysis reveals that several key documents purporting to show Mrs. Martinez's history of mental illness have been recently fabricated using digital manipulation techniques." Elena watched as Richard's confident expression wavered for the first time. His team had been so focused on attacking Elena's credibility that they hadn't expected their own evidence to be forensically analyzed. "Furthermore," Dr. Williams continued, "my psychological evaluation of Mrs. Martinez shows no signs of the mental instability alleged by the opposing counsel. She demonstrates remarkable resilience and rational thinking despite extraordinary stress." But the most devastating evidence came when Rebecca presented Dr. Williams' analysis of Richard's first wife's medical records. "Your Honor, I have uncovered evidence that Mr. Martinez was involved in the suspicious death of his first wife during childbirth 12 years ago," Dr. Williams testified. "The medical records show the same pattern of unauthorized medication and falsified documentation that we see in Mrs. Martinez's case." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the implications of Dr. Williams's testimony became clear. Elena felt a surge of vindication mixed with horror as she realized how close she had come to suffering the same fate as Richard's first wife. Judge Morrison called for order before addressing Richard's legal team. "Mr. Burke, do you have any response to these serious allegations against your client?" Burke's confident demeanor had completely collapsed as he realized that Richard's past had finally caught up with him. "Your Honor, these allegations are completely unsubstantiated and represent a desperate attempt to distract from the real issue of child custody." But Rebecca wasn't finished. Your Honor, we also have evidence that Mr. Martinez has been bribing medical professionals and court officials to support his fraudulent claims. Financial records show payments to corrupt practitioners who were willing to falsify documents and provide false testimony. Elena watched as Richard's carefully constructed empire of lies began to crumble in real time. The network of corrupt professionals he had built to support his deception was being exposed for what it truly was. Additionally, Rebecca continued, we have evidence that Mr. Martinez was responsible for the death of Amanda Stevens, the woman who was prepared to testify about his criminal behavior. Ms. Stevens did not die from an accidental overdose. She was murdered to prevent her testimony. The courtroom was completely silent as the full scope of Richard's crimes was revealed. Elena felt a mixture of justice and sadness as she thought about Amanda, who had died trying to help expose the truth. Judge Morrison spent several minutes reviewing the evidence before addressing the court. Based on the testimony and documentation presented, I am issuing an immediate restraining order prohibiting Mr. Martinez from any contact with Mrs. Martinez or the minor child Sophia. Elena felt tears of relief streaming down her cheeks as she held Sophia closer. The nightmare was finally ending. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I am awarding full custody of the minor child to Mrs. Martinez, with no visitation rights for Mr. Martinez pending the resolution of criminal charges related to the allegations presented today. Richard's face had gone pale as he realized that his elaborate scheme had not only failed, but had exposed him to criminal prosecution for multiple felonies, including fraud, conspiracy, and murder. Mr. Martinez, you are ordered to surrender your passport and remain within the jurisdiction pending criminal proceedings. Bailiff, please take Mr. Martinez into custody. Elena watched as Richard was led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit and confident demeanor no longer able to protect him from the consequences of his crimes. The man who had once controlled every aspect of her life was now powerless to hurt her or Sophia. As the courtroom cleared, Elena sat holding her daughter, feeling a profound sense of liberation. The woman who had discovered Richard's betrayal in a doctor's office months ago had evolved into someone strong enough to defeat a monster and protect her child. Elena, it's over, Rebecca said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Sophia is safe, and Richard will never be able to hurt either of you again. Elena looked down at her daughter's peaceful face and felt her heart expanding with gratitude and love. Sophia would grow up free from Richard's influence, surrounded by people who loved and protected her. That evening, Elena sat in Rebecca's living room, nursing Sophia while watching the news coverage of Richard's arrest. The same media outlets that had portrayed Elena as unstable were now reporting on Richard's criminal enterprise and the systematic abuse Elena had survived. Elena, you did something remarkable, Lisa said, having flown in for the court proceedings. You took on a man with unlimited resources and corrupt connections, and you won. Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The naive woman who had trusted Richard completely was gone forever, replaced by someone who had learned to be strategic, suspicious, and fiercely protective. I didn't do it alone, Elena replied. Rebecca, Margaret, Dr. Williams, Dr. Santos, you, all of you helped me find the strength to fight back. Elena's phone buzzed with messages from supporters who had followed her story and celebrated her victory. The viral video that had once humiliated her was being overshadowed by news reports that vindicated her claims and exposed Richard's crimes. Dr. Santos called to check on Elena and Sophia's health. Elena, I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. You've shown that victims of systematic abuse can fight back and win. Dr. Santos, none of this would have been possible without the medical care and support you provided. You helped me understand that I wasn't crazy or paranoid. I was responding rationally to real threats. As Elena prepared for sleep that night, she held Sophia close and made a promise for their future. We're going to build a beautiful life together. Sophia, your mama learned how to be strong, And I'm going to teach you to be strong too. Elena knew that recovery from Richard's systematic abuse would take time, but she also knew that she had the support network and inner strength necessary to heal and thrive. The pregnant wife betrayed had become the mother who triumphed over evil, proving that love and determination could overcome even the most sophisticated manipulation and abuse. The heartbreaking family drama that Richard had orchestrated had ended with his complete defeat and Elena's total victory. Sophia would grow up knowing that her mother had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, creating a legacy of strength and courage that would inspire her throughout her life. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with a simple affair had ended with Elena discovering reserves of power and resilience she never knew she possessed. She was no longer defined by Richard's betrayal. She was defined by her courage in fighting back and protecting her child. Elena drifted off to sleep, holding Sophia, surrounded by the safety and security she had fought so hard to achieve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, mother and daughter were safe, loved, and free from the monster who had tried to destroy them. 6 months after Richard's conviction and sentencing, Elena had built a peaceful new life in Portland with Sophia. The legal battles were over. Richard was serving a 25-year prison sentence for multiple felonies, including fraud, conspiracy, and second-degree murder in his first wife's death. And Elena had finally found the security and happiness that had been stolen from her. Sophia was thriving, a bright and healthy 6-month-old who filled Elena's days with joy and purpose. Elena had started a consulting business helping other women who were survivors of domestic abuse, using her experience and legal knowledge to guide them through their own battles for freedom and safety. "Elena, you've built something really beautiful here," Rebecca said as they sat in Elena's new apartment, watching Sophia play on a colorful blanket spread across the living room floor. "You've taken the worst experience of your life and turned it into a way to help other women." Elena felt proud of what she had accomplished in rebuilding her life. The woman who had been systematically abused and manipulated had emerged stronger and more purposeful than ever before. "Rebecca, I couldn't have done any of this without your help. You didn't just save my legal case, you saved my entire future and Sophia's future." Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Santos. "Elena, I have the final DNA test results you requested. Can you come in this afternoon to discuss them?" Elena had requested comprehensive genetic testing for Sophia to ensure that there were no hidden medical issues that might require special attention. Given Richard's history of medical manipulation, Elena wanted to be absolutely certain about every aspect of her daughter's health. At Dr. Santos's office that afternoon, Elena settled Sophia in her carrier before sitting down to review the test results. "Elena, Sophia's genetic profile shows that she's a perfectly healthy baby with no inherited medical conditions to worry about," Dr. Santos began. "But there is something unusual in the results that I need to discuss with you." Elena felt a familiar chill of concern. After everything she had been through with Richard's deception, any unexpected medical news made her anxious. "What kind of unusual result?" Dr. Santos pulled up the genetic analysis on her computer screen. "Elena, the DNA results show that Richard Martinez is not Sophia's biological father." Elena stared at Dr. Santos in shock. "That's impossible. I was never with anyone else. Richard is definitely the father." "Elena, genetic testing is extremely accurate. According to these results, there's no biological relationship between Sophia and Richard Martinez." Elena's mind raced as she tried to understand the implications. If Richard wasn't Sophia's father, then all of his legal claims about paternity and custody rights had been based on false assumptions. "Dr. Santos, could the test results be wrong? Could someone have tampered with them?" "Elena, we ran the test multiple times using different labs to ensure accuracy. The results are definitive. Richard Martinez is not Sophia's biological father." Elena felt a strange mixture of relief and confusion. Relief because it meant that Richard had no biological claim to Sophia, but confusion because she couldn't understand how this was possible. "Dr. Santos, If Richard isn't the father, then who is? Dr. Sanos hesitated before continuing. Elena, the genetic analysis shows some unusual markers that suggest artificial reproductive technology was involved in Sophia's conception. What do you mean by artificial reproductive technology? Elena, I think you may have been the victim of unauthorized artificial insemination during one of your medical appointments. Someone may have used donor sperm without your knowledge or consent. The horror of what Dr. Santos was suggesting hit Elena like a physical blow. Richard's manipulation had been even more extensive and violating than she had realized. Dr. Santos, are you saying that someone artificially inseminated me without my knowledge? That Sophia isn't Richard's biological child because someone used donor sperm instead? That's what the genetic evidence suggests. Elena, this would explain why Richard was so confident about his plans to steal the baby. He knew that genetic testing would eventually reveal that he wasn't the biological father, which could have been used to question your fidelity and fitness as a mother. Elena felt sick as she realized the full scope of Richard's calculated betrayal. He had violated her body as well as her trust, using unauthorized medical procedures to create a situation that would support his fraudulent custody claims. Dr. Santos, can we find out who the biological father is? The genetic markers suggest that the donor sperm came from a commercial sperm bank. We could potentially trace the donor through the bank's records, but that would require legal authorization. Elena looked down at Sophia, who was sleeping peacefully in her carrier, completely unaware of the shocking revelations about her conception. Regardless of how Sophia had been conceived, Elena loved her daughter completely and unconditionally. Dr. Santos, Sophia is my daughter no matter what, but I need to understand exactly what was done to me and by whom. That evening, Elena called Rebecca with the devastating news about the DNA test results and their implications. Elena, this means that Richard's crimes were even more extensive than we proved in court, Rebecca said. Unauthorized artificial insemination is a serious felony that carries additional criminal penalties. Rebecca, should we pursue additional charges against Richard Will? This information affects Sophia's legal status. Elena, this information actually strengthens your legal position because it proves that Richard has no biological claim to Sophia whatsoever. As for additional charges, we can certainly pursue them if you want to ensure that Richard faces consequences for every crime he committed. Elena spent that night holding Sophia and processing the shocking revelation about her daughter's conception. The baby she had thought was Richard's biological child had actually been conceived through his ultimate act of violation and deception. But as Elena looked into Sophia's innocent eyes, she realized that the truth about her conception didn't change anything about their relationship. Sophia was her daughter. Period. The method of conception didn't matter. What mattered was the love and protection Elena could provide. The next morning brought an unexpected phone call that would add yet another twist to Elena's already complex story. Mrs. Martinez, this is David Chen from Pacific Genetics Laboratory. I understand that you recently received DNA test results for your daughter that showed some unusual genetic markers. Elena felt her heart racing as she wondered what new revelation was coming. Yes, Dr. Santos explained that the results suggest artificial insemination with donor sperm. Mrs. Martinez, I need to tell you something confidential about those test results. The genetic profile we found matches a donor who has specifically requested to be contacted if any of his biological children are identified. Elena felt overwhelmed by the implications. Sophia's biological father wanted to meet his genetic offspring. Mr. Chen, what kind of person requests contact with their biological children? What does this mean for Sophia and me? Mrs. Martinez, this particular donor is a medical professional who only donates to help families who are struggling with infertility. He specifically requests contact because he wants to provide medical history information and potentially develop relationships with his biological children if the families are interested. Elena felt torn between curiosity about Sophia's biological father and protectiveness about their carefully constructed new life. Mr. Chen, Can you tell me anything about this person? Is he someone safe for Sophia to know? Mrs. Martinez, I can tell you that Dr. Michael Santos is a pediatric cardiologist who has helped dozens of families through sperm donation. He's extensively screened for genetic, psychological, and character factors. Elena felt her heart stop. Did you say Dr. Santos? Is he related to Dr. Maria Santos, my obstetrician? Mrs. Martinez, Dr. Michael Santos is Dr. Maria Santos's brother. I believe she may have been involved in facilitating the connection. Elena felt the pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Dr. Santos had been more than just a caring medical professional. She had been protecting Elena in Sophia by ensuring that Sophia's biological father was someone trustworthy and caring. That afternoon, Elena met with Dr. Maria Santos to understand the full truth about Sophia's conception and the Santos family's role in protecting her. Elena, I need to explain something that I should have told you months ago. Dr. Santos began. When you first came to me seeking protection from Richard's medical manipulation, I realized that your pregnancy might have involved unauthorized procedures. Dr. Santos, did you know that someone had artificially inseminated me without my consent? Elena, I suspected that Richard had arranged for artificial insemination using donor sperm as part of his plan to eventually claim that you had been unfaithful. When I ran genetic tests, I discovered that my brother Michael was the biological father. Elena felt a strange sense of completion as she understood the full story. Dr. Santos, did your brother know that he was Sophia's father? Michael knew that his donation had been used in your case, and he specifically requested to be contacted when Sophia was born. Elena, my brother is a wonderful man who wants to provide medical support and potentially a relationship with Sophia, if you're comfortable with that. Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized that Sophia's story wasn't just about surviving Richard's betrayal. It was also about the unexpected blessing of having a biological father who was genuinely caring and trustworthy. Dr. Santos, I'd like to meet your brother. Sophia deserves to know her biological father, especially if he's someone who can provide love and support. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment holding Sophia and reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. The pregnant wife betrayed had discovered that her daughter's conception involved not just Richard's violation, but also an unexpected blessing in the form of a caring biological father. The heartbreaking family drama that had begun with Richard's affair had evolved into a complex story of survival, justice, and unexpected family connections. Elena's phone rang with a call from Dr. Michael Santos, Sophia's biological father, who wanted to arrange a meeting. Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that I have no intention of disrupting the beautiful life you've built with Sophia. Dr. Michael Santos said, I simply want to provide medical support and potentially develop a friendship that could benefit Sophia as she grows up. Elena felt hopeful about the possibility of Sophia having a positive father figure in her life. After everything they had survived, they deserved the blessing of expanded family connections with people who genuinely cared about their well-being. Dr. Santos, I'd love for you to meet Sophia. She's a remarkable little girl who deserves all the love and support we can provide. As Elena prepared for sleep that night, she reflected on the twisted path that had led her to this moment of hope and possibility. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with Richard's calculated deception had ended with Elena discovering that Sophia's true parentage involved people who genuinely cared about their well-being. Elena looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her arms, and whispered, Your story started with your mama being betrayed, but it's going to continue with all of us loving and protecting you. The DNA test that was supposed to be Richard's final weapon against Elena had instead revealed the last piece of a puzzle that proved how completely his evil plans had failed. The pregnant wife betrayed had become the mother who discovered that even the worst betrayal could lead to unexpected blessings and new family connections that would enrich Sophia's life in ways Richard's manipulation never could have achieved. Elena drifted off to sleep knowing that Sophia's future was bright, secure, and filled with love from people who would protect her and help her thrive. The echoes of Richard's betrayal would always be part of their story, but they would never again have the power to hurt Elena or Sophia. They had survived the storm and emerged into sunlight, surrounded by people who loved them and committed to their happiness and success. Tomorrow would bring the first meeting between Sophia and her biological father, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives that was defined not by betrayal and fear, but by love, hope, and the promise of a bright future built on truth and genuine caring.